How could Jake have done this to me, after 8 sacrificial years being the family ATM, supporting the entire family to ensure he had a future? The day I went through my brother's business plan, what I found made my blood run cold. His scheme was illegal, and there in the middle of his pitch to clients was my name and photograph, with me listed as co-director. He'd put me in danger of prison, and as I found out later, my family didn't even care. I never thought I'd be telling this story. But sometimes betrayal comes from the people who should love you most. When my dad lost his manufacturing job and Mom's arthritis crippled her nursing career, I buried my Chicago dreams and became the family lifeline at 24. My marketing degree collected dust while I drained my bank account, keeping the family afloat. "We'll only need help for a short time," Mom would promise, squeezing my hand across our dinner table, and my dad would nod in agreement, shame shadowing his eyes. Meanwhile, my brother partied through Penn State on my dime, fraternity weekends, Cancun spring breaks, and that shiny MacBook Pro I'd paid for while my own laptop was held together with duct tape. "Stop being such a buzzkill, Melissa," Jake would snap whenever I mentioned budgets. I wish I'd recognized the warning signs back then. Only, family comes first, right? That's what I thought too, until I realized how much my family had really taken from me. Fast forward to last December. I was wrapping Christmas presents in my tiny apartment when my phone lit up with a text from Jake. "Big news! Got offered a job at Goldman Sachs in NYC. Starting salary $120K. Celebrating at Mom and Dad's this weekend. You coming?" My heart swelled with pride. All the late nights, all the sacrifices, they were finally paying off. Jake had graduated and landed his dream job. Maybe now I could finally think about my own future. I stopped by Whole Foods on my way to my parents' house that Saturday, splurging on an expensive bottle of champagne. This was a celebration, after all. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar BMW parked outside. The moment I walked through the door, I knew something was different. My parents' modest living room had been transformed. A new leather sectional sofa had replaced the worn-out couch I'd grown up with. A massive 75-inch smart TV dominated the wall where our family photos once hung. And there was Jake, lounging with his feet up, wearing designer clothes I knew he couldn't afford on his own. "Surprise!" Mom exclaimed, embracing me with unusual enthusiasm. Jake wanted to thank us for all our support. Dad couldn't meet my eyes as he muttered, "Isn't it something?" Jake finally looked up from his phone. "Hey sis, what do you think of the upgrades? First round of my signing bonus. Figured the folks deserved something nice for a change." I plastered on a smile and handed over the champagne, trying to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. Something felt off about the whole scene. That night, as we celebrated Jake's success, I couldn't help but notice how they all seemed to be avoiding the elephant in the room, the years I'd spent supporting them financially, putting my own dreams on hold. "To Jake," Dad toasted, his voice thick with emotion, "the son who's going to put this family back on the map." The words stung more than they should have. There was no acknowledgement of my sacrifices, no gratitude for me putting my life on hold. I could have been long gone, living my life. Despite Jake splurging now out of his bonus, I wondered how he would have behaved if he had to support the family for years on far less income and pay for my university expenses as well. There was just no way. But that was Jake. Spoilt. I was far more disappointed with my parents. Later, as I helped Mom with the dishes, I casually mentioned that with Jake's new income, maybe I could finally look into that marketing position in Chicago I'd been eyeing for years. She froze, soapy plate in hand. "Oh, sweetie, about that. Your father and I were hoping you could continue helping us for just a bit longer. You see, we're thinking of fixing up the house now that Jake will occasionally be bringing clients home." I nearly dropped the glass I was drying. "Clients? He lives in New York. Well, he'll be visiting often, and he thinks it would reflect poorly on him if his parents' home looks, well, the way it does." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything I'd sacrificed, they were still asking for more, not for necessities, but for appearances. For Jake. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of the betrayal. A week later, I received a call from Dad that would change everything. "Melissa, honey, we need to talk. Can you stop by after work?" It was rather unusual. After all, he could have just said what he wanted right then, but I agreed to drop by. When I arrived, the whole family was seated around the dining table, and I almost laughed as it all looked suspiciously like an intervention. My good humor didn't last for very long. Jake had apparently extended his stay and was wearing a smug expression that made my skin crawl. "We have an exciting proposition," Mom began, her eyes bright with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen in years. Dad cleared his throat. "Jake has been talking to us about an investment opportunity. He's starting a side business, financial consulting for families like ours who've had struggles." Jake leaned forward. "It's a sure thing, Mel. I've already secured investors from my Goldman connections. All we need is some seed money to get the office space and website up and running." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to me. That's when it hit me. "You want my money," I said flatly. "Not want," Jake corrected with a condescending smile. "We're offering you an opportunity to be part of something amazing. Ground floor, family business. I've already put in $20,000 from my savings," Dad added proudly. My jaw dropped. Aghast, I said, "Dad, that's your retirement fund." "Investment in our future," he corrected. "Jake says we could triple it in the first year." Mom reached across the table and took my hand. "We were hoping you could contribute $50,000. We know you've been saving for that condo, but this is a chance for all of us to finally get ahead." My family wanted me to hand Jake $50,000, I thought. Had they all been smoking weed? Hand over my entire savings after 8 years of supporting them. The money that was supposed to finally fund my independence. "I need to think about it," I finally managed to say, pulling my hand away. Jake's friendly facade cracked slightly. "What's there to think about? After all we've done for you. All you've done for me." The words escaped before I could stop them. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. "What Jake means," Mom interjected quickly, "is that we're family. We support each other. That's what we've always done." I excused myself shortly after, claiming a headache. As I drove home, tears blurred my vision. Had they always seen me as nothing more than a checkbook? Had my sacrifices meant nothing? If only I'd walked away, then and there. Against my better judgment and the explicit advice of my best friend Tara, I agreed to look over Jake's business plan before making a decision. It turned out to be one of the wisest, most prudent decisions I ever made, and you'll soon understand why. Jake emailed me his business plan the next morning with a note that read, "Thanks for believing in us, sis. This is going to change all our lives." Quite ironically, it turned out for once he was perfectly correct. I spent my lunch break reviewing the document, and what I found made my blood run cold. The business wasn't a consulting firm at all. It was a thinly veiled Ponzi scheme targeting vulnerable families struggling with debt, families just like ours had been. Jake planned to use our family's success story as the marketing hook, complete with before and after photos of our parents' house. And there, listed as a co-founder and financial hardship specialist, was my name. He had already been using my story, my sacrifice, to pitch to potential clients. Without my knowledge, without my consent, I called him immediately. "What the hell, Jake? You're lying to these people, and you're using my name." "Calm down," he said dismissively. "It's just marketing. Everyone embellishes in this business." "Jake," I responded angrily, "this isn't just embellishment, it's fraud, and I want no part of it." I added, "And take my name, my photos, and every reference to me being part of your Ponzi scheme out of all your marketing material immediately." His voice turned cold. "Too late. Mom and Dad have already invested, some of their friends too. Are you really going to be the one to ruin this for everyone?" The threat was clear. Either I played along, or I'd be blamed for destroying the family's financial future. Again. That night, I couldn't sleep. Everything I thought I knew about my family had been turned upside down. The people I'd sacrificed everything for were now willing to sacrifice my reputation, possibly even my freedom, for a quick payday. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I called in sick to work the next day and drove straight to my parents' house. I needed to make them understand what they were getting involved in before it was too late. When I arrived, I found Mom and Dad in the backyard with a contractor, discussing plans for a new deck. A deck I knew they couldn't afford unless they were counting on Jake's promised returns. "We need to talk," I said firmly. "All of us. Now." Mom looked alarmed at my tone, but Dad dismissed the contractor and let us inside. Jake was still asleep upstairs at nearly 11 a.m., so Dad got him out of bed, something guaranteed to put him in a bad mood. But today, I didn't care one bit. This was much too important and urgent. He appeared in the kitchen doorway in silk pajamas, looking irritated. This had better be important. I had a late client call last night. His tone was dismissive, but I could see he was wary. He knew why I was there. It's not just important, Jake. It's urgent, I confirmed, placing a folder on the kitchen table. I've printed out everything I could find about the business model you're proposing. It's a scam, plain and simple, and it's so amateur it will land you in big trouble. Mom gasped. Melissa, how could you say such a thing about your brother's work? Because it's true, I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. He's not creating a legitimate business. He's creating a pyramid scheme that preys on desperate families. Jake's face darkened. You don't know what you're talking about. You're just jealous because I'm finally doing better than you. Jealous? I laughed incredulously. Jake, I've spent the last 8 years of my life making sure you could get the education to do better than me. I wanted you to succeed. What I didn't expect was for you to go and learn how to become a criminal. Dad started flipping through the paperwork, his expression growing more concerned with each page. Jake, is this true? Are you misrepresenting what you're selling to people? It's called marketing, Dad, Jake snapped. Melissa doesn't understand how business works in the real world. She's been stuck in this backward town for too long. That's when I pulled out my final piece of evidence, a recording of a phone call Jake had made to one of Dad's friends from the manufacturing plant, promising him guaranteed returns if he invested his entire severance package. As the recording played, Mom's face crumpled. Dad's hands began to shake. Jake lunged for my phone. Turn that off. You had no right to record my private business calls. And you had no right to use my name and story to scam innocent people. I shouted back. The argument escalated quickly. Years of unspoken resentment poured out from all sides. Jake accused me of trying to keep the family dependent on me. Mom cried that I was trying to ruin our chance at a better life. Dad just sat there looking defeated. After everything I've done for this family, I said, my voice breaking, how could you turn on me like this? I gave up my dreams for you. I put my life on hold so Jake could have opportunities. And this is how you repay me? By trying to drag me into a criminal scheme? The room fell silent. Get out, Jake finally said, his voice cold as ice. If you're not with us, then you're against us. I looked to my parents, waiting for them to defend me, to acknowledge everything I'd sacrificed, to choose right over wrong. But Mom just stared at her hands, and Dad couldn't meet my eyes. They'd both just seen and listened to absolute proof with their own eyes and ears, and then decided to ignore it. In that moment, I realized a devastating truth. They had already chosen, and it wasn't me. I grabbed my purse and walked out, wondering if I'd ever walk back in again. The next few weeks were the darkest of my life. My family completely cut me off. My calls went unanswered, my texts unread. It was as if 8 years of sacrifice had been erased overnight. I threw myself into work, trying to numb the pain. Tara kept urging me to report Jake to the authorities, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Despite everything, they were still my family. Then came the email that changed everything. It was from a man named Robert Godfrey, identifying himself as an investigator with the Securities and Exchange Commission. They had received an anonymous tip about a potential investment fraud targeting vulnerable families in the Pittsburgh area. My name had come up in their preliminary investigation. My heart nearly stopped. Someone had reported Jake and implicated me in the process. I called the number in the email immediately and spent 2 hours explaining everything, how my name had been used without my consent, how I'd tried to warn my family, how they'd chosen Jake's scheme over my concerns. We'll need you to come in and make an official statement, Mr. Godfrey said. And Miss Williams? I should warn you that your brother and potentially your parents could face serious charges. I hung up feeling sick. This was exactly what I'd been trying to prevent. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at old family photos. Despite everything, I couldn't bear the thought of my parents going to jail because of Jake's actions. They were misguided, yes. Ungrateful, definitely. But criminal? I wasn't so sure. I picked up my phone and, against Tara's explicit advice, called my dad one last time. To my shock, he answered. "Melissa?" His voice sounded smaller, older than I remembered. "Dad, we need to talk. The SEC is investigating Jake's business. They've contacted me." The silence on the other end was deafening. "Dad? We know," he said finally. "They came to the house yesterday." "I didn't report him," I said quickly. "I need you to know that. It wasn't me who told the SEC. There was another long pause from his end. "It was me," he admitted finally, his voice cracking. "I reported him. After you left, I looked more closely at what he was doing. You were right, Melissa. It was all a scam. He was using our family's reputation and my friendships to take advantage of people who trusted us, people who believed in our integrity." I sank onto my couch, speechless. "Your mother didn't want me to call you," he continued. "She's still processing everything. It's hard for her to believe her only son is a crook, but I needed you to know you were right, and I'm sorry, so sorry, that we didn't listen to you." For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to cry. "So what's going to happen next?" I asked. "Jake's already been arrested," Dad said, his voice hollow. "He's facing serious charges. Your mother and I were cooperating with the investigation. They don't think we understood what was happening, but we're returning every penny that was invested." "Your retirement money? It's all gone," he admitted. "And the new furniture, the TV, the contractor, we've canceled everything. We're back to square one." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of 8 years pressing down on me. "No," I said finally, "not square one. Square one was when I believed in this family, when I thought we were all in this together." Dad was quiet for a long moment. "Can we meet up?" he asked eventually. "But not here at the house. Your mother's not quite ready, too emotional. Maybe that coffee shop you like?" Part of me wanted to refuse, to let them face the consequences of their choices without involving me. But another part, the part that had spent 8 years putting family first, couldn't walk away completely. "Tomorrow morning," I agreed eventually. "Let's meet at 8 a.m. The neighborhood coffee shop was nearly empty when I arrived the next morning. My dad was already there, sitting near the window, looking much older than his 58 years. He had 2 cups of coffee on the table in front of him. He pushed one towards me as I got to the table. "Your usual vanilla latte, extra shot," he said with a weak smile, trying to hide his sadness. I sat down cautiously, feeling unusually awkward. I wasn't entirely sure why I'd agreed to the meeting. "Your mother wanted to come," he began, "but she was up all night. The stress, you know." "Dad," I interrupted, "I didn't come here for excuses. I came because despite everything, you're still my family, but that doesn't mean I'm ready to forgive and forget." He nodded slowly. "I understand, and we don't deserve your forgiveness or respect, Melissa. What I did was unforgivable. I let greed cloud my judgment. Both of us chose Jake's promises over your proven loyalty." "It wasn't just about loyalty," I responded firmly. "It was about right and wrong. Isn't that what you taught us? How you raised us to know the difference? You said we should always choose the right path. Choose to help and never harm. Choose integrity over profit. What Jake was planning wasn't just illegal, it was harmful. It would have hurt lots of people just like us. I understand and appreciate that now," Dad admitted. "I think part of me knew it then too. I think it was just that after years of struggling, years of watching you sacrifice for us while Jake pursued his dreams, I wanted to believe we could finally have something good, something easy." "There's nothing easy about fraud, Dad. It has consequences, life-changing ones," I responded. "No," he agreed, "and there hasn't been anything easy about what you've done for us all these years, something I never properly acknowledged." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn notebook. I recognized it immediately. It was my mother's budget book, the one where she'd meticulously recorded every expense and every contribution I'd made to the family over the years. "Your mother and I sat down last night and added it all up," he said, pushing the book toward me. "Everything you've given us, not just the money, but the time, the opportunities you passed up." I opened the book hesitantly, looking through page after page. On the very last one, with writing in my mother's neat handwriting, was a figure that made my throat tighten. Almost $128,000. Wow, I hadn't realized it was that much. "We can't pay it back," Dad said, his voice breaking. "Not now, probably not ever, but we want you to know that we see it now, all of it, and we are so sorry for taking you for granted. I closed the book. I was unsure what to say. There's something else, Dad continued. He slid an envelope across the table. Open it. Inside was a deed. My name was on it. The house? I asked, confused. Dad nodded. It's all we have left. Your mother and I talked about it, and we want you to have it. You paid for most of it anyway. We'll find a small apartment. Dad, I can't possibly take your house. It's not charity, Melissa. It's restitution. We can't give back the years you lost, but we can at least try to give you a foundation for the future you deserve. I stared at the deed, emotions warring inside me. Anger at their betrayal, grief for the family unity we'd lost, relief that they finally recognized what I'd sacrificed. And underneath it all, a stubborn, persistent love that 8 years of supporting them had embedded deep in my heart. I'm not taking your house, I said finally, pushing the deed back toward him. But I will accept something else. Anything, Dad said immediately. Your blessing to finally move on, to take that job in Chicago, to start living for myself. To my surprise, tears filled his eyes. You've always had that, Melissa. I was just too selfish to say it. Too afraid of losing your support. Your mother and we've got some hard times ahead with Jake's legal troubles, but that's our burden to bear now, not yours. It's past time for you to live your own life. Something shifted inside me then, not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the beginning of healing. And what about Mom? I asked. Dad sighed. She's struggling, blaming herself, blaming me, blaming Jake. She needs time, but she asked me to give you this. He handed me a handwritten letter. I recognized Mom's handwriting immediately, but I couldn't bring myself to read it just then. Give her time, Dad said gently. This has been a shock for all of us. We sat in silence for a while, sipping our cooling coffees. So Chicago? Dad asked eventually. I have an interview next week, I admitted. It's the position I turned down 8 years ago. They remembered me. Of course they remembered you, Dad said, with the first genuine smile I'd seen in months. You're unforgettable, Melissa. I'm just sorry it took us so long to see that. As we parted ways outside the coffee shop, Dad hesitated, then pulled me into a hug. It felt different from the obligatory embraces we'd shared recently, more genuine, more equal. We'll make this right, he whispered. Not today, not tomorrow, but somehow. I promise. I didn't make any promises in return. The road to rebuilding trust would be long and uncertain. Jake was facing legal consequences that would likely include jail time. My mother was still coming to terms with everything, and I had my own healing to do. But as I drove home, I opened the car window and felt the spring air rush in, fresh, new, full of possibility. For the first time in 8 years, I was driving toward my own future, not away from it. I pulled over and finally opened my mother's letter. It was short, just a few lines. My dearest Melissa, there are no words to express my shame and regret. You deserved better from us, especially from me. I hope someday you can forgive us. But more than that, I hope you can now live the life you put on hold for us. It's time. With all my love, Mom. Tears blurred my vision as I refolded the letter. The pain wasn't gone, the betrayal still stung, but something else was there too, a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, this broken family could find its way back to each other. Not as the people we were, with me as the provider and them as the takers, but as something new, something more balanced, something built on honesty and respect rather than obligation and expectation. I put the car in drive and continued on my way, feeling lighter than I had in years. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in ages, it was mine to choose. And that made all the difference. Hope you enjoyed this tale. What did you think of Jake and Melissa and their parents? Should Melissa have reported Jake? Have you ever had major issues over money, betrayal, or other events? Drop your wildest stories in the comments. Let's chat about it. And more importantly, let's learn from it. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more real-life stories you won't forget in a hurry.